Hello and welcome to the Full FX Unfiltered. My name is Colin Lambert. I am publisher of the Full FX, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Andy Coyne, who is founder of Cobalt FX. Andy, nice to see you again.
Likewise.
So our most recent conference, this is being filmed just before our London conference, was in Chicago on the sidelines of FIA Expo. And what struck me talking to people in the derivatives industry is how traumatized they still are by that Ion hack earlier in the year. And that kind of got me thinking about, okay, do we have these failure or these risks in the foreign exchange ecosystem? And we've discussed this several times before. So I thought it'd be good to get you in, to talk about those risks. And coincidentally, Cobalt FX has just launched the Trade Notification Network this very morning. So we can talk about that. So first of all, maybe we'll kick off there. What is TNN?
Yeah, Trade Notification Network. It is. It's really a response to what you just mentioned. The industry has woken up to a major problem, which is really about the single point of failure. Yeah. And a lot of people are being asked. A lot of banks that we work with have been asked by their risk departments, "Do we have any other single points of failure?" To which the answer is invariably, we do, but it's not in the execution space.
Yeah.
And I think you wrote a really good article about that previously, that execution was well catered for because it's highly competitive.
Yeah.
In post-trade, people get the benefits of consolidation to an extent, but the consolidation in the FX market, in the post-trade space in particular, has created this problem. So I think a lot of clients started asking us about, is the consolidation an issue and the hacking an issue, the cybersecurity an issue? How do we deal with that? We're starting to become nervous. So we started to think about how should an alternative look, and an alternative post-trade network in particular. And it goes with all the usual things, real time, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is, for us, we got to the point, well, should people pay for messaging? So we just made the decision, okay, they can pay for services, but they shouldn't pay for messaging. So we essentially made it free.
Because I guess you don't pay for email, do you?
You don't pay for email, you don't WhatsApp messages, whatever. Obviously, these are financial contracts, but nevertheless, they are fairly formatted or fairly well formatted. So we figured that it was more important to give people an alternative network, but also make it easy for them to adopt. We do most of the work. Easy for them to adopt, but also give them competition and give them backup to what is essentially a single point of failure.
And that is actually the key point of this, isn't it? I think your other arguments are good, and giving it away for free, I think, will always be popular anytime.
Yeah. We're not a charity either, but the reality is people, and I remember this back in the day. I remember trying to reconcile my messaging and the fees I was paying, and I struggled with it. Yeah. And I know other clients do struggle with that. The reality is there is an opportunity to pay for services, value add. Certain things that feed the value added services shouldn't have to be paid for.
Yeah. I mean, so in terms of, I guess that's the what, and my second question was going to be why. And I think we've kind of covered that because it's probably important to know that everybody takes their cybersecurity seriously. The point I made in my column a few weeks ago was Ion Group took its cybersecurity very seriously, but they still found their way in. There are always going to be vulnerabilities, aren't there?
Yeah, at the end of the day, that particular scenario was a wake-up call. Yeah. It really made people think that you're dealing with very clever people with malicious intent, and they are there. They get paid to find those vulnerabilities. So the reality is, everyone is very much focused on cyber security. Okay, and how do we know that any part of the marketplace cannot be interrupted? Okay. Yep. Now we know that people are a bit more relaxed about post trade, but they shouldn't be. They are, because they think that, well, that's after the trade has happened. But if you can't process the transactions,
Yeah.
you have to stop trading. And I've been in that scenario like decades ago.
Yeah.
You know, when the back office was down, that was a siloed back office.
Yeah.
When the back office was down, we had to tell the traders, you've got to either stop or slow down your trading because we can't cope.
And that's why it's important for traders. This stuff.
Really, really important.
And speaking as an ex-trader, probably we never paid enough attention to it.
You got that right. Yeah. It's something that, and people forget that the whole post-trade system, it's not the journey of a trade to its end, it's also credit.
Yeah.
Right, every transaction changes the credit profile, so there's a loop going on. This is why we came up with dynamic credit, which solves another industry problem. But the reality is, credit is looped. It continually changes, and people should be able to change it. Post trade, people need to be able to, and that has a feedback loop into credit as well.
Yeah.
Has my trade settled? Okay, should have a feedback loop into credit. Okay, now it does on our system, but actually a lot of people assume a trade has settled when it might not have. Very small things, but these are where all the skeletons are buried. The trade notification network is quite important in the sense of creating the competition that people crave, making it easy for people to get up and running. So we do most of the work, making it easy for them to make a financial decision, because you can use it as a backup or you can use it as a primary, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. And the key then becomes interoperability of services.
Which is something I did want to talk to you about, because I mean, what are the opportunities, but also what are the risks involved in that? Because, you know, if somebody gets into one part of the system and there is interoperability, does that inevitably heighten the risk of making it a systemic event?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now we have a systemic problem, and the regulators are starting to think more about this. They're starting to, without ringing alarm bells or anything, they are quietly saying to people, let's have a look at this and make sure that it's safe. I mean, it is the biggest market in the world. We can't have a systemic issue with the biggest market in the world, particularly around points of concentration. So, and post-trade is a point of concentration because that is more efficient. However, people need choice, people want competition. And because of that, you need to be able to separate services into their components and not put any components at risk. So don't put credit component at risk, don't put a netting service at risk, don't put a payment netting service at risk or an allocation service at risk, all these things. You have to make them separable. And they have to interoperate. So a client needs to be able to select a service from one party and a service from another, knowing that they can interoperate with security breaks or firewalls, if you like, between them. Right? It's quite important that you don't perpetuate a problem, because hackers will know how to spread. And look, I was looking at that hack, the details of that hack, and these things are designed to spread like a virus. They spread. And you have to be able to stop them.
I think at a broader philosophical level, maybe to close out with, my perception of the industry's view of post-trade has always been, we like the utility. Why do we have competition in post-trade when it's not a revenue-generating business for us? It's just it's a cost, but a cost we can actually sort of minimise. So what you're doing and what you're attempting to do here, kind of saying, let's have a discussion about that utility model, because in 15 years ago it probably worked, but are we now at a stage where you're saying we actually think we need to look at the utility model in the post-trade space and question its value?
There are a number of utilities that the market uses. There are clearly benefits to utilities because in theory they it's like any factory. You know, making matches, it doesn't really matter, but you get someone doing a particular job and you keep repeating it and you get faster and it gets quicker and it gets cheaper. The reality is, though, that a lot of these utilities do not interoperate properly. So the industry needs to say, okay, I like the sense of a utility because the things I don't compete on are far cheaper to do. They run at scale. They're very secure. Blah blah blah. However, I do need interoperability, and I do need competition.
Yeah.
Right. So the industry needs to take on the responsibility for dictating what they really need.
Yeah.
It's very easy to delegate things to third parties and say, "Oh, you take care of that for me because you're more efficient at it and you do it for several people." But there has to be an input to say, "I need you to do it in a certain way, and these are the things that really concern me. How do you interoperate? How do I know you are not going to get hacked? How do I know that you're not going to be down?" These are questions that people ask us every day. This is why we do VRM, etc. But the reality is they have to be continually tested.
Yeah.
And interoperable, and that's one thing we struggled with getting other similar services to interoperate with us because they think we're competition.
Right.
Which is what our clients have asked for, but nevertheless, it's like, well, you're the client, you tell them to interoperate with us. So you do see that. So behavior has to change somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because I guess just randomly to close out, one of the initial, I guess, product offerings from Cobalt was that golden copy of a trade.
Yeah.
As we get more towards a golden copy, then that kind of increases the importance of interoperability, doesn't it?
Correct. So the creation of golden copy can happen very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Within milliseconds.
Yeah.
The golden copy of an execution that everyone has agreed to can happen in milliseconds. It's not in 2 hours or tomorrow. It can happen now. That's really important. A golden copy means that from that point you do not have a reconciliation problem with respect to that trade or that group of trades.
Yeah.
And everything from there is accurate. Credit is accurate, cash flows are accurate, payment netting is accurate, all these things become accurate. But what a lot of people do with the golden copy is they store it. And I don't blame them, because they feel like, well, I need to be able to take the golden copy and keep a copy of the copy. Fair enough. And this is how blockchains work. There are multiple copies of the same data. But there are so many copies, that's what makes it that's why blockchain is an important concept for the marketplace. Even though we run a shared ledger, we have several copies of the ledger, because you got to make sure that you always have a backup, you always have a plan B. It's very important, part of the resilience of any infrastructure.
To avoid that blockchain becoming, or that shared ledger becoming
hacked or whatever.
The single point of failure.
Correct. You got to recognize the problem, deal with the problem, and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. Great. Well, I mean, it's sadly it's quite an important subject at the moment, isn't it? And
it is.
I think we'll probably hear more of it. Great to see you again. Thanks for your time today, Andy, and thanks everyone for watching. And we'll be back again soon.